Okay. It looks like Jess's internet is flaky today also. All right. So functions. So now that we understand how to code in JavaScript, we are coding in a sequence. So for example, I can write this line and a this line and a this line, like this, right? What if I want to repeat something, right? Repeat in the sense a logic that I want to repeat. Um, I or piece of logic that I want to repeat, right? I need something called function. And what function does, it's a collection of logic, um, and it takes something in and it returns something. So function typically, um, I can write it like this. So function, let's say if I say add, and this is how you write function. And I can pass number one and number two. So these is called parameters. Parameters or arguments, you could call it. Um, and so functions are, they start with a keyword called function. Then there's a name of the function called add. And this function basically takes two numbers, number one and number two, and it returns um, number one plus number two. Right. So we have created a function that does a summation. You can ask that, hey, why can't I just simply write a summation, right? I mean, I don't need to have a function. This is just a simple example. You can do way more than this, right? But the idea is all the logic goes within this function. Okay. If I want to execute this, I can say let sum equal to add one and two. As you can see, number one is represented by one. Number two is represented by two. And internally, it will just add those two numbers, and this would be three. And when I said returns, which means that three back, and sum is nothing but three. Okay, so if I just console log this, I would get three. Setting here, behavior. Okay, so I get three. If I, let's say, pass two and two, I would get four, right? So function allows you to do that. And you can write way more logic inside here. It doesn't have to be uh, just one liner. You can write more uh, complex logic. For example, let's say if I want to find out if a number is a prime number or not, I can write a function um, called is prime, and I can pass a number. Let's say I pass 11, and then it returns true or false, right? It returns basically true or false based on the logic here, right? I can write a whole logic. Let's look at that um, um, JavaScript is prime, for example. And I can just copy one of these because I don't want to write this. So let's say this is a is prime. Um, so I can just copy the whole thing. And I can just write it inside here. And what I'll do is, instead of is prime, I would just call it the result equal to true. And this would be a number. Oh yeah. Okay. All right. So I've created this, well, I've copied this function called is prime. Okay. Don't worry about the logic, but when I pass this, so it becomes like a black box in a way, right? I pass a number. Let's say if I pass 11 and it tells me if this number is a prime number or not. Anyone know what a prime number is? A meaning of prime number? Prime number is a number that can only be divided by itself or one. So if I take, for example, 11, I cannot divide by 2. If I divide by 2, I get a remainder, right? So the objective is to not get any remainder. So if I divide by 2, I get a remainder. If I divide by 3, I get a remainder, 4, 5, 6, all the way up to, obviously, if you divide by 11 by itself, you don't get a remainder, but that makes sense, right? So 11 is a prime number, right? So this logic checks whether a number is a prime number or not, right? So now if I want to use this, I can simply do this. Console log is prime, and I can just pass 11, right? And I can run it to see if it makes sense, right? So it says true. Yes, 11 is a prime number. If I do 1011 to see if it's a prime number, and let's see, it's false. It's not a prime number. Okay. So I've created a utility in a way that takes something and returns something, and inside it does something. So every time I want to look for a prime number, I don't need to write all this logic in my code. I can just use this function to do that. So the function has some logic inside. It takes a number, processes it, and returns something, right? So it becomes this a box that does something inside, right? And I can, if I want to use this anywhere, I can do that. So I can say, console log is prime 2, right? And I don't need to write the whole logic over and over again, right? It just works. So function's job is to do a specific thing, and I can reuse it. So it's reusability, it's power, right? So far, we haven't actually created anything that we can reuse. So this is the first time we are looking at something called function, which we can reuse. Okay, so it's almost like abstracting some logic outside your code and building as a function. Okay, and just disregard like how the logic here inside, because we need to understand how the prime number work, but this is just an example. Okay, so let me give you another example. Function, let's say greeting. So in terms of greeting, I can say pass name, right? And I can say return um, good morning plus name, right? So what this does is it takes a name. So if I want to call this, I can say console log and then greeting. And I can pass, let's say, John, right? So if I do that, it will basically say, good morning, John. If I say Peter, it will say, good morning, Peter. So I don't, for both of them, I don't have to repeat the logic. The logic is built inside, right? It takes a value, name, it takes Peter, and it returns good morning, Peter, right? So this is a simple example of how you write a function. Any questions on this one? And you can pass
I have
multiple
a question.
values.
I have a question.
Sure.
Why did you omit the semicolon at
Oh,
the console log?
here?
Yeah.
Here?
Or
Yeah,
is it necessary?
yeah. So so in olden days, semicolons was necessary, but if you omit it, it does not. It still works. I would say always add them. So if I just format this, it will automatically add those semicolon. You see. So it was I unintentionally missed the semicolon, but it worked regardless, right? So,
Okay, thank you.
but there are consequences when you sometimes when you miss it, and it can create problem, but not in this case. Okay. Um, let's write. Let me give you an exercise. Uh, let's write a greetings. I want you to write a function called greeting. And well, let me show you how I'm going to call it, and then you can write it. So I want to say good morning and Peter. And this would return good, basically it would return good morning, Peter, right? Let's write this function that passes both the message and the name. You can follow this format.
I got an error saying greeting is not defined. You are.
You need to write this function. I commented out, but you need to write it here, right? So you need to write a function called greeting, and then you need to pass two things, right? Message and a name, right? And then you need to write the function body. What would it return? So this is a message, and this is a name. So you need to define it. Yes, so it's a right message. So once you write this function, right, it should print this. When you run this console, it should print this. Let me know once you're done. You can put it in the chat.
I'm finished, but it looks like I don't have a space in between good morning and Peter.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So how do you get it? Because yeah, you just added them, right? So how I think we learned about in our first or second class how to add. Think of space as another string. So you can add space by adding a string.
Can I just add a space in front of Peter?
Uh, you mean here,
Yeah.
like this?
Yes.
Yeah, that's not a good idea because when you write pass a name, you're never gonna have a space in front, right? What you need to do is you need to provide a space inside that function.
How do we do that?
Right. So the solution is you would just say return. There are multiple ways to deal with this. So if I simply do this plus name, right, you will get what you are getting right now, right? Which means there's no space here, right? So then say plus an empty string with some space and then plus name, right? That's a one way of dealing with this. Okay. Another way to deal with this is remember we learned about template string in the beginning. So we can use this backtick. And then, but then our messages becomes like a variable, which means we would use it like this. We would put a $sign, message, space, $sign, name. And so you can see this space, then you don't have to do plus space. It becomes, if I put a lot of space here, then that space gets reflected in here, right? So this is another way of dealing with this.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so this is a simple function. As I said, you can pass as many argument as possible, but the return would be only one, right? You can only return one thing, but you can pass many things here. Make sense? And if I want to just return one thing, um, you can return it as using something else like an object or something. So where you mix all the value, right? But yeah, it always returns one thing. In this case, it's a string. It could be another example would be, let's say, function add to array. Let's say if I build this function, and if I pass an array and then pass some values, say 1, 2, 3, something like this, right? So I'm passing an empty array and 3 values, and then I can sorry, in this case it will be I would have to name it, right? So I can say array number 1, number 2, number 3, like this, right? And it returns well, it can do something before returning. So it can do this. It can say array.push n1, array.push n2, n3, and then returns array, right? So I've built a function that allows me to add things to array. So if I say, let's say let final array equal to add to array, I can pass an empty array and then 1, 2, and 3, right? So an empty array is this, 1, 2, and 3 are these. So inside it takes the array and then it passes, pushes this 1, 2. Push means, add to the end, right? And then if I console log the final array, it should show me the array with all the values, right? So I built a utility function that lets me, push things inside. This is just an example, but yeah. I've taken values and I'm returning something, right? Any questions? Okay. There's another way to actually write a function. So one way is, as I said, you can write add, right? N1, N2, return N1 plus N2, right? This is one way to write function. Another way to write function is as a variable, where you can say let add equal to, then you write a function. It's the same thing, but in this case, and it does exactly the same thing. This is called function declaration. And this is called function expression. And this is where I can, calling them is exactly the same way. If I call them add 1, 2, it will return the same thing because the function body is the same. It's just different way of writing a function. In this case, we have written function in a variable. And the reason for saving it inside a variable is so that we can, which we'll see in next part, we can pass it around in another function, okay, which is called a callback function. So that is very important. All right. There is something so this is function expression. There is something called arrow function. It's also same thing, except it's a short form of a function. And this is important to note because you're going to see this a lot when we code. An arrow function, we would do the same thing. It's a shorter form of function expression. So we would say add equal to, and we just take the function keyword. So we don't use this function. It would be simply N1 and N2. Okay. And then here we would put an arrow. Okay. And if it's a single line return, then we won't even say and return N1 plus N2. We would just simply do N1 plus N2. Right. The usefulness of this is it's easy to read. You can say, I'm taking this two things and I'm returning this. Right. And so the arrow shows what I'm returning. It's like outputting, putting this in, outputting this too, right? So this is called arrow function. Okay. As I said, we will learn about this in the next topic, which is called a callback function. Now, this is where JavaScript shines. What is a callback function? Is you can pass the function inside a function. You must be wondering, this is a little bit crazy. Why would you pass a function inside a function, right? The reason you would pass function inside a function is you can abstract things out, right? So for example, let's just keep those things here. Let's say if I want to build a calculator. So I'm going to call it let let's say function calculator, right? And this calculator, I want to be able to pass any two numbers. It doesn't have to be, what if I pass, you know, I can add, I can subtract, I can multiply, I can do anything. All I need is two numbers, N1 and N2, right? But then I also want to, whatever I wanted to do, let's say if I want to add, then I would simply do this, add, okay? And this add is nothing but another function that allows me to execute this add inside the calculator. Okay, so I can pass this add inside. Okay, and this is an arrow function. So this is how it works. It might take a few minutes to get your head around it. Once you understand it, it's like a light bulb goes out, right? It's like, wow, this is really cool. So this is, I would call it a callback function. Why is it called callback? Which means it doesn't, you just pass the functionality in and with a bunch of numbers, and the functionality, if it's an addition functionality, and then it would add. If it's a multiplication functionality, then it would multiply. So for example, this is an add function, right? I can create a multiplication function where I can do N1, N2, and I can multiply those two numbers, right? So this is a multiplication. If I want to write, let's say, subtraction, right? Then I would write something like this, N2, and this function takes two numbers and subtracts N1 minus N2, right? So I've written three functions. So in calculator, what I'll do is I don't provide any specific functionality. I just say, you need to pass whatever you want to do. If you want to add, you need to pass the add function. And then what I'll do, because so in here, what I have a function and I have two numbers, right? So all I need to do is return callback, and then I'm just going to pass N1 and N2, right? So if this was, let's say, an add, so this is how you call it. So you can say calculator add 1 and 2, right? Think of this way. The callback is nothing but add function. This is 1 and this is 2. So inside, and remember, this is nothing but an add function. So inside, we are just taking this function and then passing these two values inside. So inside is just basically the add 1 and 2, and it's returning the sum of it, right? So this should, if I console log this one would basically give me 3. Okay, as you can see, it gives me 3. But if I do subtract, in that case, it passes this function inside, and then it will do the same thing. So 1 minus 2 is minus 1, right? And if I do mult, then it will take 1 and 2 and multiply that. That should give me 2, right? 1 multiplied by 2 is 2. So in this calculator function, which is very simple, it says, there's some functionality that I'm going to pass in, and I have two numbers, and that functionality will decide what to do with these two numbers, right? If it's an add function, it's going to add. If it's a multiplication function, it's going to multiply. And if it's a subtraction function, then it's going to subtract. The reason this might look kind of, weird right now, but this is really useful in many cases. For example, let's say in HTML, you have a button, right? And if I click on it, I want something to be done, right? So in HTML, you would have a function called click, right? Now, what to do with this? Because I have no idea. Because if I click a button here, it should basically open another window, or it could do anything, right? But you don't want to predefine that. So you would have a callback, right? And it will execute based on whatever it thinks it should do, right? And so you need to provide that. What should happen when I click on it, rather than fix functionality when I click on something. That's how a callback function works, right? Any question on this one? Any question on this one?
I have no questions.
Okay. All right. So just remember this format. Callback is nothing but a passing function inside a function, and then inside just executing it, right? And then this is again, very simple example. There's way more complexity in most of the callback function, but this is, just to show you how it works. Now I'm going to show you a use of a callback function and how it works and how it makes sense. Okay. And this is the real, you're not going to probably write a lot of callback functions, but you can use the existing functionality that are built in that. Okay, so there are three functions that are pre-built. One is called map. Map, filter, and reduce. There's three functions that are pre-built, and they use callback function very heavily. Okay. So this is how it works. You take an array. So let's say if I have an array. 1, 2, and 3. Okay. And then I want to map this. So let's say if I want to multiply every number by 2. So which means the result would be, 2, 4, and 6. Okay. If I want to do that, then I have to write this logic where I have to go through every single number, and then I have to build some logic, right? But instead, I can use this map function, and I can segregate the functionality of doubling something, because ultimately we are doubling every single value, right? So what I'm gonna write is let double equal to, I take a number and I return double the value, right? Make sense? So you take a number and then double it. So if let's say console log double of 3, right? So this should return me 6. right? It takes a number and it doubles it. Okay. Now, I need to operate then on each of these numbers, right? In this case, we are actually doubling the entire array, not only just single number. So this double doesn't really work, right? Because it just takes a one number and it doubles it, right? But we can, there is a nums, which is an array, has a map function. And then what this map function does is you just pass the double, right? So okay. So this is a callback function. The map function basically say operate on every single value of something, right? And this double function operates on a number and it doubles it, right? So if I console log doubled, which is a doubled value, it should give me 246. Okay. Let's practice this. I want you to do, if I pass 1, 2, 3 in here, it should give me tripled, which means it should give me 3, 6, and 9. So instead of double, it should triple. Let's practice this so you can understand this. Again, you're not going to be building all of these. You're just going to be using it, right? So just understanding is very important.
I finished.
Okay. So this is very simple. You just have to change one tiny thing, right? And you really don't need to understand what a map does, but you need to what map does inside. But what map does in a concept is it operates on every single value of the array, right? So if I want to double every value, right, then I need to pass the function called double that that doubles every number that you pass inside, right? And it does that for the um, entire array. Yeah. How about everyone else? Finished? I'll give you a few more minutes. But I think this is a key concept. I think once you understand this, you would understand. There are three functions, as I say, the map, filter, and reduce. They're so useful, and they'll let you process a lot of things. So when you're building the games, you might need to double something or a double specific value, things like that, right? This will let you do that.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I was wondering in the console log, it's got the grayed out, like the hashed out object array.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I haven't been noticing or seeing that before. Um, why is it doing that in the console log?
So this is a special console log. This is not your. This is a console log of a CodePen. Okay.
Uh-huh.
So what it's doing is it's giving you a value, and it's just saying that it's just summarizing for you on the top, because you might have a very big object, right? So on the top, it's summarizing for you, saying that this is an array, right? And it has three values. And it's not basically just giving you a type of what you're looking at. I mean,
Okay. Yeah.
If you inspect inside a browser, for example, let's say if I go to console here, you would see this format. Okay. Actually, it does not give you this format. So this is coming from CodePen. CodePen is very CodePen gives you kind of a neat version of it, right? But here it'll just give you what array is, right? You have an index and a value, right? And a length. But here it's a summarized value of it.
Is there a reason that it's showing up for these results? It's just because it's coming across an array. It's like trying to help.
Yeah, just trying to help. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. This is actually not a real console. This is a real console is in your browser, right? If you right click on your browser and do inspect, that's a real console. Okay. Yeah. All right. So, okay. So now you understand that how it works, right? Now let's understand something else. What if you want to say, if it's a first value, okay, then I don't want to double it. How do we achieve that? If it's a first value, then I don't want to double it. Otherwise, double it, right? Because you don't always want to double everything. There's a case where you want to do something different, right? So, there are so many ways to do. So what this does, you can also pass an index here. Okay. So this function pass has two things. It gives you a number and an index. Okay. And if the index is, let's say 0, right? Because 0, which means a first value, then you don't double it. Otherwise, you double it, right? So then you would say, in that case, you have to write, if it's not a single value, then you have to write it like this. You can say if index equal to 0, if not equal to 0, sorry. Right? Then you basically double it, right? So you can say return 2 multiply by n. Else, simply return the same value, right? So think about this way. If I console log, let's say double, well, if I pass 2 and index as 0, around double, 2 and 0, right? This is now going to double it, right? So, and this time I'm only running this function, right? So it gives me 2 back. It doesn't double it, right? But if I pass 1 index, then it will double it, right? Or any other other value, 2 or 4, whatever, right? So that's what's happening. So this double function, now I've modified it so that it doesn't double the number. It also checks a second parameter. If this is 0, then it doesn't double it, but otherwise it doubles it, right? So now, map function also passes, when it's executed inside, right? So now if I look at that, the actual value here, you can see it's a 146, which means the first number, it doesn't double, but the rest of the number is doubling. So you can actually make this a little bit non-linear. And then, how about this? Let's do such that fifth number should not be doubled. Okay. Every other number can be doubled. And you can pass, no, not fifth, let's say this now 3. So it should return something like this. When you double it, it should do 2, 4, and then 3. So the third number doesn't get doubled. Let me know once you're done.
I finished, but my arrow shows 146.
146. Okay. So the logic should be, so it should be somewhere here the issue is, right? So in this case, we are saying if it's a first value, then don't double it, otherwise double it, right? Oh, sorry, if it's not a first value, double it. Here we want to say if it's not a second value, right? Actually, third value, because the index is 2, which means 0, 1, and 2, which means don't double it for this 3, right? And so if I run this, oh, sorry, not 143. It should be 243, right? But if I want to do 143, then I can say only double the second value, right? Then I can say if it's equal to 1, which means a second value, right? This is the index, right? Which is 0, 1. So only double for this, for everything else. Keep it like that, right? So in that case, I can do it like this, right? There's actually a shorthand for this, which is very nice. So you don't have to do return and all that stuff. There is a shorthand for if and else. And the way it works is, if I were to do this, for example, let me just show you this. This is pretty nice. So you can say double equal to n, an index. And remember, if it's a single line, then you don't need to do return for arrow function, right? But this, because there are multiple lines, that's why we're putting return here. And it's called conditional statement, shorthand conditional statement, which means the first we compare. So we can say if index equal to, let's say 1, and then whatever it's true. So like if this is true, then we want to do this, right? And then that would be, we would say if this is true, then we would return n, 2n. Again, we don't say return in this case. Otherwise, we return n. So it's kind of a silly syntax, but it basically means if If index is 1, then return 2n, otherwise return n. So question mark, which means if this is true, and this is means else. Okay, so this sometimes it's hard to read, but once you get used to it, it's pretty simple. And so it will do this exactly the same thing, right? But it's a shorthand, right? Okay, so so this is map function. So map function, the thing about map function is map function always returns the same size of the array, right? So we took this in and we can return something like this, which is double the value, right? But you can see the number of values exactly the same, right? What if you want to filter something out from this one? So we can say, hey, I want to remove one from here, right? And so the result array should be 2 and 3, right? So we are filtering values out. So for that, there is another function called filter. So map basically takes the array and it returns exactly the same number of values, but the values are different, right? Filter takes 3 numbers, returns 2, right? So let's see how it works. So we would say nums dot filter, and again, it takes the callback function. Okay, filter function. We need to build this function. So let's say let filter equal to, we'll take the n, which is, again, it's the same concept. We would take a number and we would decide which number to keep, right? And it would be the same thing. It will be n, and you also get the index, and then we can return something. So in this case, give me an idea how to filter this. Like, we can filter by index. So you can say remove the second item. You can filter by value. So you can say, if you see 3 inside, filter it out, right? So you can say, if n is equal to 3, right? Filter it out. That's it. Okay, so let's run this. Oh. Filtered. And then I have to console log it. Oh, if it's not equal to. So this basically means what to keep. Okay, so keep any number that is not equal to 3. Then you do this. If I say only keep 3, right? Then it only keeps 3. You can also keep the first number. If index equal to, let's say, 0, keep that one, which only keeps 1, right? I can say keep index that is less than 2, which means it's going to keep the 0 and 1, so it's going to keep 1 and 2, right? See how easy it becomes now? We write a very simple function called filter, and it allows you to filter it. We actually we are thinking about the meat of the function, right? Which is which value we're filtering, and we're filtering based on that. So we don't have to write the whole logic of how it actually filters it, right? We get a value and an index for every number, and then we decide if you want to keep this number or not. That's it, right? So let's say if I have I want to keep let's say this should return 4 and a 5. You decide how you want to do that. You can do by value, you can do by index, but in the end, it should return this. Remember, you all you have to do is change this and play around with it, right? This means what you want to keep. That's it. Okay. So the way, still working on it. Are you done, Lily?
Yes.
Okay. So, um, so this is filter, right? So all you have to remember is what you're passing in and what is being returned, right? So everything else is going to get filtered from this array. This is very useful. So as I said, in a filter, you pass something and what you get is less or equal to. Sometimes nothing gets filtered, right? You may provide a filter that doesn't really work. You might get the same amount of values, but filter ultimately reduces your array size. The last utility function is called reduce. And this is my favorite one. And what reduce does is it takes a whole array and it returns you one thing, right? So when do you want to use something like this? Let's say if I want to add everything in this array. So let's say if I want to add all the values, which means I can take 1 plus 2, 3, plus 3, 6, plus 4, 10, plus 5, 15. So let's say if I take this array and I want to give the sum of every single value, which is 15. Okay, how do I do that? So it's the same thing. I would say nums dot reduce. And then inside I would pass a function called reduce. Again, you can name it whatever you want, whatever you pass, but I'm calling it reduce function. And what this does is it's got a value, right? It's got an index, and then well, it's got three things actually. It's got the value. It's also get instead of two things, you need three things, right? You need a running total and index. In this case, I don't really care about the index, but I'm gonna and then you get index, right? But in running total bit, which means because it's a reduced function, it gives you an extra field, a running total, which means you will basically take the number and then take the number and add it to the total. Okay. So if I were to run this, without running the reduce function, so, it's just like a sum, right? Oh, console log. Let's say reduce. And if I say 1 and let's say 3 is the total, it gives me 4. It just takes the running total and add 1 to it. It gives me 4, right? So that's all it is, right? So if I want to, so though, if in a nutshell, if I want to add everything, I need to keep a running total, right? Which happens inside of this reduce function. And so it takes the first value. So initially the running total is equal to 0. Okay. And then you basically take the first, so 0 and 1 gives me 1. So total is 1. And then again, it takes 1 plus 2. So the running total is 3. Then it takes 3 plus 3. So running total is now 4. And then sorry, not 4. So 1 plus 2, 3, plus 3, that's 6. 6 plus 4, that's 10. And then 10 plus 5, that's 15, right? So that's all it does. So it has a running total, and it does this, okay? Reduced. So if I run this, did I run this? Oh, I forgot the console on this. Okay, 15. Right? So this is how it works. It's pretty simple in that sense. This gets an extra feel because of this nature of how it works. But again, all the magic happens inside this reduced function. Okay. If you want to know what happens, you can always like look through the code to see what happens, but you don't really need to know, as long as you know that, passing this function would change the behavior of this function, right? In this case, you can actually, in fact, so let's say if I don't want to add the first number. Okay. In that case, I can use that, what is it called? The function that I showed you, right? So if the index is, let's say, not equal to, well, if it's equal to 0, then I just want to pass total back, right? I don't want to add anything. Otherwise, I want to add this, right? So it will skip the first one, which means it should give me 14. That is interesting. If index equal to 0, then return total. Otherwise, total. Okay, it's not working here. Okay, maybe I'm wrong about this. Let's see. I forgot if the index comes at the end or not. Okay, let's look at the reduce function. JavaScript reduce. This is the function. Okay, so it has a, oh, it doesn't have index. It does not provide an index. That is interesting. Oh, it does provide an index here. So it has a, oh, you know what? Oh, this is the reduce function. This is the total. This is the n, and this is the index. It's the only one where there's a switch, right? So I can say if the index is, let's say, equal to 0, then return the total. Otherwise, return n plus total. Okay, so I want to skip then n. So this should give me 14. No, What? So accumulator, current value, current index. Hmm. If this is the current index, if index equal to 0, then return total. Let's, I mean, it should be the same thing. Okay. There's something I'm missing. This one is a little tricky. Apparently, yeah, this is total. This is the number, and this is the index. That's what I say. The total is accumulator, right? The second is a current value, which is the n, right? And then the last is the index. Okay, let's look at it. JavaScript, reduce, skipping the first element. Let's see. Somebody's already built this one, so we can look at it. People write complex stuff here. Okay, so here there's a reduce. US current index, okay. If the yeah, but this is not the yeah, I have to find a simple example. Because this is not working. Oh, now it's working. It's 2. Sometimes I think like I'm seeing a ghost. Okay, so 5. So if I make this 3, which means okay, 9, which makes sense. 2, it's 12, right? So if I count from here, like 9, 12, right? So if it's less than 2, which means I'm skipping 0 and 1, then it adds up to 15. And let's say if this is 1, then it should be 2 more, which is 14, right? Why is it okay? So it doesn't work for the first element. This is really strange. It should give me 14, not 15 here. Okay, I have to solve this. But anyway, yeah, this is a little bit strange. Okay, but yeah, I'll give you guys a solution. I have to debug a little bit. Let me give you another example where I can use all of this. So let's say if I want to build a burger. What do I need? Anyone? Let's go. I know we're a little bit over, so we'll go another 10 minutes. What do I need for building a burger?
Gotta have those buns.
Buns, yes. You have buns. Then what do you need?
Lettuce, tomato.
Yeah.
Maybe. Maybe it's an onion, pickle. Now you got me hungry.
Pickles and um, meat if you eat meat, right? Okay. Oh, forgot the lettuce, right? Okay. But, you know, imagine this is raw material, right? Which means what do you need to do? You need to cut, right? So if you get this from the market, I think the only thing that you would see cut would be like pickles. Everything else would be um um raw, like you'll get a raw tomatoes. So you need to first cut it, right? So we need to apply map function. Okay, so I would just do let processed, right? Because I've processed it, I've cut them. So I would say raw and then cut, right? So what is a cut? So cut is a function, right? So now you'll get the idea of how it works. Is a function that takes an item. Remember, we were passing n. You can just call it an item, right? And then we are, processing it, right? So, obviously we can do cut encoding. So I'm just making two piece basically, right? So I would just say item divided by two. So cut into like buns cut into, tomato cut into, pickles is already cut, right? Meat cut into, lettuce cut into. Obviously, it's going to be a big chunk of lettuce, but okay. Or you can say, if it's you can build the whole thing. You can say if it's a lettuce, right? If the item equal to lettuce, right? Then you know, um, peel, right? Okay. If it's pickles, don't do anything, right? Right. You don't do anything. Or then just return the pickles, right? Returns the item, right? So you're taking each item, which could be anything, right? So if it's a lettuce, do this. If it's a pickle, do this. Um, and so you're actually providing the process to cut each of them, right? But in this case, we're just gonna do this. We're just gonna say item divided by two, right? So we cut them. Now we have a processed items. Now let's say we have a vegetarian in the house. So we need to filter the meat, right? So exclude, right? So we would say item, and then we would say if item is not equal to meat, then we are okay, right? So basically filter out anything that is filter out a meat basically, right? And then for that, we can just say processed. So, but we take the processed, right? Not the raw. So we take the processed and then we filter. Oh, I was supposed to say map here, right? And then we'll pass the exclude. Exclude, right? And then what we get is processed no meat, right? Okay, now we want to build a burger. What are we gonna do? We're just gonna put everything together, right? In one. So initially we had what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 items, right? We got the same amount of item, but then it's in a different form. Then we excluded meat, which means we have then 4 items instead of 5 here, right? And then we're gonna build a burger. So we can say we need to build, or how do you say build? Yeah, I just call it build. Build equal to let's say total and item, right? And what this does is take the total plus the item, which means total is the burger, right? It just puts everything on the top of each other. And then what you get is burger equal to a process with no meat. We take that filter and processed items and then reduce it to one item by building the burger. Now, does that make sense? Right? So anything that you do, you need any of these 3 things to an array, right? You need to either map to something, either filter something, or reduce to something. There are other stuff as well, but this kind of like standard stuff, right? So what you get in the sense is a full burger. So you get the raw material. Now we have a burger. Actually, there was an example. Map, reduce, filter. Somebody has built this same example, not this one. Oh, right, here's the example, right? So you get all these items. Oops. You can map it to something. Oh man, this yeah, it's a different meaning of it, but anyway. But but you get the idea, right? So this is the cook function. This is vegetarian function that filters something, and eat basically processes something to one. Okay. There are lots of resources that helps you understand these 3 functions. Mostly you're going to use them, right? You're not going to build it, but this gives you like a concept of callback functions, right? How they work. Any questions? So that's quite a bit of stuff. Okay. If they're not no questions, then yeah, I think next week we're gonna do I'll give you some homework on this one. This is a very important one. I think from next week we're gonna start building our React app. So far what we learned, and we just learned the basic stuff. We haven't went too deep inside, but I think this one gives you all the tools to build a React app, right? So we learn about the different data types. simple types like numbers, strings and all that stuff, right? And then we learned about repeating something using for loop, making a decision using if and else statement. And then we learned about the complex data structures like arrays and objects. And we also, last time we looked at how we can build stuff using mixing them, right? We can represent any scenarios, life scenarios, right? And then today we learned about the functions and callback functions, and specific callback function called map, reduce, and filter. Okay, there are tons of stuff still we need to learn, but what we'll do is we'll start with React, and then if we need to learn something in JavaScript, we'll learn then. But I think this gives you a good platform. Okay, so I think you can start building your games in React. You will really like React. Now you have a fundamental, you'll understand that. But React is almost like, so this is like as I said, always like this is like a silly putty, right? Building using this is very difficult. React is like a Lego, right? It gives you this structure stuff. So, but you need to understand the basic JavaScript because React is nothing but JavaScript, but it has, you know, functionality already built in that you can use. Okay. So yeah, that's it. Any last question before we end? All right. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna ask, I haven't really looked into React, but is the sort of like user interface different? Is it still sort of like coding, but just using I don't know. Like I'm not sure exactly what I'm asking. It's
So we're gonna
like
so
you're
far,
using building blocks.
yeah.
What do they look like?
Yeah. So let me quickly show you. So this is a CodePen, right? Which is for JavaScript. There's a similar code sandbox. Okay, and this is for React. Actually, the code sandbox you can just write pure JavaScript or React or a lot of things you can. I mean, it's got so many different things, right, that you can write, and these are all different kind of platforms or frameworks. Like Angular is a framework, Next is a framework, React is a framework. Okay, so you can build all of these. So the heck. Okay. Okay. So this is an example of a React. Okay. So now React is same thing. You know, you have an HTML here, CSS, and JavaScript. So far, we are only learning JavaScript, right? But in code sandbox, everything is mixed. React has everything mixed. So in this case, you would see a function called app that is returning this HTML, right? And it's producing this. And if I want to say, this Grammarly is always annoying. Okay. And then you get something like this. So you can see it's all mixed in one. HTML, CSS, JavaScript, everything in one. Okay. But this is nothing but JavaScript. Everything is JavaScript here. Even though you see this HTML, it just syntax, but it's actually, this is JavaScript. So use JavaScript to do everything pretty much. And that's its power, right? But yeah, you will learn let me give you some example. Code, sandbox, React. Say, and somebody build a snake game. Let's see. Right? So this guy has built a game. And the number of lines of code is only like 200 lines. You can see it's pretty straightforward game, right? If you want to build this in like a pure JavaScript, it would be quite difficult, right? This is obviously a JavaScript, but we are building some of the syntax, borrowing the functionality from React and then building it, right? So React has built some stuff for you and we're just using it to build it, if it makes sense. Okay, so that makes our life much easier, right? So you can see there's no, so HTML is kind of embedded inside the JavaScript. Okay, obviously there are multiple files, it's not only one file. You can see there are like, button has its own file, food in the game, there's a food, right? This is the food. In the snake game, there's a food, right? So food has its own menu, has its own function. So you can break that. Snake is also a separate component and everything. But yeah, we'll learn it. But because we know functions and we know arrow functions, you can see this is the arrow function. Remember, we learned about the map, right? So we're gonna use that functionality. So that's why I taught you things that are needed to be, to build this, right? And I think this would help us, build robust games. Yeah.
Cool.
All right.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, it should be fun. You can, I think you guys will love it. It's such a nice framework. Yeah, once you understand it, you can just, sky is the limit. What you can build. You can build a website like this. You can, like Facebook is built. Instagram is all React. Facebook is React. I think nowadays most of the big applications are built in React. So once you know React, you can use that to build a lot of cool stuff. All right. Cool. Yeah, today we took a little longer because I thought this is really important topic. Hope you guys, even though it takes a while to grasp a lot of these concepts, you need a little bit of practice, but hope you got at least a gist of it, right? That's the most important thing. So all right. If no more further questions, we'll see you guys next week.
Bye. Thank you.